Well, we're back working on the Bachmann outside frame consolidations, the Connie.
The Connie.
And last week we looked at different kinds of couplers and said we're going to convert these guys over to AMS couplers. This one has the original Bachmann coupler, and we're going to be getting rid of that. And the reason is we want something that works just like that, the prototype couplers.
Well, that would be ideal.
We want something that looks more appropriate, and we want something that works really well with these cut bars in place. So there's a system here for uncoupling the cars where they grab a hold of a handle and lift that up, called the cut handle or the cut bar, and it's connected by this chain over to the pin in the coupler, and then by pulling on the handle it lifts this bar here, and that will pull the pin up out of the coupler.
Well, that's really neat.
That's pretty cool. So that's what we want, and the AMS coupler will do that exact same thing. Now, two of our locomotives have been fitted with Katie couplers.
Right.
And those are really neat, but they don't work the way we want them to work. So we're going to get rid of the Katies, and we're going to get rid of the original Bachmanns too. Moreover, the whole system that's on here is kind of falling apart.
Oh, dear.
So anyway, we want to upgrade and update and figure out how to convert this whole thing over to AMS couplers. Now, two of the locomotives with the Katie couplers in the front, they've simply kept the original Bachmann coupler pocket and then fitted that with a Katie coupler. And that's not really going to work for us, so we're going to get rid of that whole front-mounted system so that we can switch over to this, the AMS true-to-scale coupler.
Oh, neat.
And we like the look of these, we like the way they work. It's a little bit scary because it involves actually cutting into the model. But we're going to cut in and mount these up in here, and then we also need to hook up the release pin to the cut bar. So that's the release pin on an AMS coupler. Doesn't look anything like the prototype, but it works really well, and that's key.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now the AMS coupler comes with its own coupler pocket.
Oh, neat.
And you kind of have to use that because the centering springs and everything are part of that coupler pocket. So it really involves changing your whole system over to AMS. It's not like Katie where you can just switch them out. Now the biggest thing that we're going to be changing is the cut lever.
Oh.
Because the ones that come with the locomotive, at least at the rear of the locomotive, aren't going to work like the prototype that is not designed to do that. These are prototype cut bars. And one thing about cut bars is every car you look at has something different.
That is really different. That's also very rusted.
Yeah. But I swear every single car I've looked at to get ideas for cut bars, the cut bars are always different. But the one thing they do is they pull out that pin.
Yeah, whatever works. I guess that's what you use.
That's what you use. And that's the pin that locks the knuckle. And so that's what we're going to try to duplicate here. Notice that on this one locomotive, the cut bar that's there, first of all, it's only decorative. There's no way that it would be functional. On top of that, it's broken.
Well, yeah, that's obvious.
It's come loose from the stanchion over here, and that has actually broken the stanchion slightly. So this was my solution. Completely redesign the cut bar.
Well, there it is.
And it has to be a stronger system because it's actually going to lift the pin. And I silver soldered the whole thing together, but it still wants to come loose from that stanchion at the far right. So I have to figure out some solution over there, and this was my solution. Just put these little plastic blocks under here.
Oh, the old block of wood.
The old block of wood wedged in there. And I thought, this works so well, I'm going to do it to all the stanchions because they're really fragile and any one of them could come loose, especially under the heavy use that they're going to get.
Exactly.
Now that the cut bar is actually functional.
Oh.
So all the locomotives are going to get that same treatment. This is the cut bar on one of the other two locomotives here, so you can see how that works. Now the cut bar on the front of the locomotive where it's designed to just be decorative, I think it'll work.
I think so.
It's got strength, it's got the right shape, and it's got the necessary function, which the rear one didn't have. So I'm thinking we're going to be able to just put some links of chain in there and connect it over to the pin, and it's probably going to work.
It looks like it should.
I think we're going to be okay there. Okay, so let's start with the rear couplers first,
There we go.
because I think they're going to be the most complicated. The coupler pocket is going to go right up in here, and there's that existing plate. And the only problem that I see is there's really not a lot of room here to get a couple of screws in there. And I may want to mount the coupler just slightly high to get it into some stronger plastic.
Ah.
So not a lot, or it's not going to work.
Right.
But I'm thinking of just mounting these just a smidge high so that I can get really good bite on the screws. So start by cutting away the bottom part of that plate.
Ooh.
And again, it's always scary cutting into the model.
It is.
But the coupler pocket's going to have to slide right up in there. And then you can see there's very little plastic there to get the bolt in. So I fed bolts in from the back side that will go through the coupler pocket, and then I just put a nut on the front.
Well, there you go. That should hold it.
It's pretty strong.
It looks like it.
But in order to do that, like I say, I had to mount the coupler just slightly high. But it seems to be working just fine. I reversed the bolts on the other locomotive, so the nut's on the inside. And then just for giggles, I thought I'd try it with the half-inch scale equipment and the Katie couplers, and it does work. Just barely. Not planning to do this in operation, but I just wanted to try it. Now the front coupler.
Oh boy.
This is going to be a little more challenging, maybe a lot more challenging. But we're going to get rid of that original Bachmann coupler pocket. In this case, this is the locomotive that has the front-mounted Katie coupler, and that whole piece of business is going to go away because we need to carve into the front of the engine for the coupler pocket. This is the other locomotive, the one that has the original Bachmann on it, and then here's the one with the Katie. The Bachmann is really a mess.
Yeah.
I hate the look of that.
Yeah.
But I don't care that much for the Katie either. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to completely get rid of that and go to this system with the AMS on there. It just looks a lot better.
It does.
Now, here again, I'm going to mount that coupler ever so slightly high relative to the other AMS car there, just to get better plastic, to get a little better bite into the plastic.
Right.
So here's the front of the engine with the coupler pocket removed, and we're going to cut into that section right there and then slide the AMS coupler back into the front beam. And that's going to require taking the whole front beam and pilot and everything off the locomotive.
Oh my goodness.
So there it is, much easier to work on. Just 2 screws hold the whole thing in place, and then a couple of little pieces of wire. So a little tiny bit of Dremel cutoff wheel and a little bit of hand saw, and there's the hole for the coupler pocket.
Oh gee, yeah.
Now we have to drill the holes for mounting. I'm going to use machine screws here
Oh, okay.
because I can't figure out a way to get a nut up inside that beam. There's a space back there, but as you can see, it's a really hard space to get to.
Well, you need needle nose pliers and a good strong wheel.
Yeah.
Not happening.
Not happening. So just drill the holes and then use machine screws. Also, the bottom cover on that main beam that covers that up so it isn't hollow now is interfered with by the coupler pocket, so that's going to have to be cut away as well.
Ooh.
No big deal, just slice out the very center of the cover on the beam, and now the coupler pocket just slides effortlessly in there, and if I put the holes in the right places, I should be able to just get my machine screws in there.
Yes.
Actually, this is when I was measuring to put the holes in. I haven't drilled them just yet. Now, before actually drilling the holes, I wanted to check the coupler height.
Right.
And all I'm using as a height gauge is an AMS car that came with the couplers already on it. And again, I'm mounting just slightly higher here because it gives me a little bit more strength. So there it is. I've drilled it and put 2 machine screws in there. and I was concerned that it might not be strong enough, but it's plenty strong.
Oh, good.
This is pretty indestructible. I should be able to pull a very heavy train with that. And it's the front coupler too, so I'm not really planning to put a whole lot of load on
I was just
it.
going to say, how often will you back up a train with
Yeah,
it?
I probably will only ever hook 1 or 2 cars to the front of the locomotive, but it's super, super strong. It's
Good.
going to be just fine. And it aligns quite nicely with the cut lever.
Oh, yes.
So I'm just going to put 3 links of chain, 3 loops of chain between the cut lever and the pin, and that should be all it needs. So let's go ahead and hook up the cut levers.
Yes.
Now, again, the front cut lever is going to be connected just by bending some wire, but the rear cut lever here, well, it has a couple of interesting, I don't want to say problems, but the way the Bachmann stanchions are mounted there, I have to put the little center loop off to one side slightly.
Oh.
Because the stanchion's in the way.
Oh, that's right. Look at that.
Yeah, so it's just off slightly. And anyway, I wanted to use a chain back here instead of just loops, and so the chain should solve that problem.
Oh, nice.
Now, picking out the right chain.
I was just going to say, when you're dealing with chains,
Fortunately, we have a lot of chain around the shop.
that's what we have, yes.
And I decided that the larger chain on the left looks better. It's still a very small chain.
Yes.
But it looks a little bit better than that finer chain does. So there's the chain that I've picked out to use on the rear couplers.
Well, that's perfect.
Now I just need to fabricate some loops of wire to hook the whole thing up.
Right, and that's not difficult. I do that all the time making jewelry.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of different pairs of pliers.
Right, and they both do a good job.
They both do a pretty good job, but if you don't have the right pliers for making these little loops, you just never make the loops.
No, you end up with triangles and weird things. Yeah,
You have to have the right tool. Now this is one of the pliers we have for making loops.
Right.
And you can see they just get larger around, so depending on the size of loop, you just position that in the jaws of the plier. And then this is the other tool. It's a Connie coupler adjusting tool.
Right.
And I know you use this a lot.
I use it for jewelry. It actually works well.
Well, look at how nicely you can make perfectly round circles with it.
Right.
So that's just, and this was formed entirely with the Connie coupler adjusting tool.
Right.
Now, I had the rather dim-witted idea to make the loops so that they're open like this, and then chain could be fitting through there. It didn't work.
No.
No, you can't just make these things open and then put chain in there. What you have to do is form perhaps half of the loop and then fish the whole thing together. Thread whatever you're going to do together, put it through the pin, put it through the chain, put it through the cut lever, whatever you're going to do, and then just go in with your pliers and close the loop.
Exactly. That's the same thing in jewelry making. We call it a jump loop.
So this should work better because the first system didn't work at all. So I'm threading the wire through the cut lever, and then I'm going in with my bending pliers and I'm just closing it right in place. And by using the proper pliers, I can just form a nice, perfect circle and come right all the way around and close that up, as long as I'm using the right tool, and then get in here with my cutters and nip it off.
And there it is.
And there it is. So here we have the front cut lever with the 2 circles in place, and all we need now is a link between the 2.
Right.
And there it is.
Oh, cool. Look at that. It worked.
So the front cut lever, and this is very prototypical, the front cut lever just simply has 3 loops on there and no chain. And I like the look of that, and notice that it works perfectly.
Right.
And perfectly is good enough.
That's right.
Perfect is just barely good enough. I used a slightly finer wire on the Mexicano locomotive.
Right.
Just for sort of variety, and I think that looks just
Yeah,
fine.
it looks great.
And it still works perfectly.
Right.
Now the rear coupler is going to be a little bit different because I want to put a few links of chain in there.
Oh.
Again, because it's sort of offset. And again, I like the look of it. I could have done it the same way as the other one. But in this case, I have fashioned the loop through the pin, And I did that with the chain already in place. Because again, there's no opening this and putting anything through. So I formed the loop around both the cut pin and the chain, and then I did the exact same thing at the top. I just formed the loop through both the cut lever and the chain. And again, it's slightly offset to one side, but it seems to work just fine.
That's why I was wondering if it would work being offset that way.
I was a little concerned, but it's not offset very far.
No, not much, and it seems to work just fine.
It's working just fine.
There it is.
So there it is in practice on a piece of track, and ran this back and forth a whole bunch of times to test it, and it works great.
Oh, that is really cool.
And then I thought, just to be sure, I'm going to just put a daub of silver solder at the top of this to close that loop so the chain can't possibly get out of there, as well as kind of holding it to the cut lever so it doesn't get off to one side. I should probably do the same thing here on the front coupler. It's just that I was a little bit concerned about some plastic parts right down in there. I certainly don't want to melt anything.
But I think a little dot of that really thick crazy glue would seal that right up. I do that to necklaces sometimes on cheap ones I don't want to lose.
Well, yeah,
So-
that would probably work just fine.
It will, just a little bit on that opening.
Yeah. And then the other one has a little heavier wire on it. But I think doing that with both of the locomotives,
Right.
close in those loops. And I've started the painting process while the locomotives are apart.
Right, that's a good idea.
It's a lot easier to do a lot of this painting when things are apart. So I thought I'd get some paint onto the front, and then you never see a knuckle coupler that isn't rusty, because the railroads don't paint these things. There'd be no point.
Right.
And so the knuckle is always really rusty and really gouged up and just really kind of a mess. And I want to put a little bit of weather on here. So I'm using Tester's Rust. I love that Tester's Rust. When they discontinued it, I grabbed all of it I could find off the internet. Because look at that.
It does. It looks just like they look.
That looks just like they look. I oversprayed it with just a hint of the Mr. Color Black that I'm using on the rest of the locomotive. But just to add a little bit of smoky grime and grit over the rust.
Yes.
And I love that.
Oh, it looks real.
It looks good and it works really well. So score!
Yes.
Same exact paint job now on the rear couplers.
Exactly.
And I think we will have a set of working functional couplers here. So I think we're ready to finish up the paint job and then actually start reassembling these guys.
Right.
Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do get over to the channel, because of course you want to be a subscriber at the channel so that you can follow along with this. And you can do that with the blue button.
There it is.
The blue button right there. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring, and we will see you here on Sunday with something fun. Bye.
Bye.